Before starting, it might be useful to review the graph of total utility. Before starting, it might be useful to review the graph of total utility. The horizontal axis represents the amount of good or service that the individual consumes. The amount of good or service being consumed increases as one moves from left to right. The vertical axis represents the amount of total utility. The amount of total utility increases as one moves from top to bottom. Marginal utility is the amount of utility that a person experiences as they consume one more unit of goods. So when Joe eats his first piece of pizza, his utility from eating the pizza increases from 0 to 10, or he gains 10 minus 0 units of utility, or 10 units of utility. When Joe eats his second piece of pizza, his total increases 6 units, or for a total of 16 units of utility. When Joe eats his third slice of pizza, his utility increases by 3 units, or increases to a total of 19 units of utility. When Joe eats his fourth piece of pizza, his marginal utility increases by 1, or increases to a total of 20 units. When Joe eats his fifth piece of pizza, his marginal utility is 0 because there is no increase in his total utility. When Joe eats his sixth piece of pizza, Joe's marginal utility is minus 2 and declines from 20 units of utility to 18 units of utility. Before drawing the graph for marginal utility, let's take a minute to review its structure. The horizontal axis represents the consumption of the individual. The individual's consumption increases as one moves from left to right. The vertical axis represents the marginal utility, or the additional utility that the person receives from the consumption of the good. Marginal utility increases as one moves from bottom to top. Notice that marginal utility can be negative. When Joe consumes 0 pieces of pizza, the marginal utility is not defined. Remember, we used NA to represent this value. Since the marginal utility is not defined at 0 pieces of pizza, there's nothing to put on the graph. When Joe eats his first piece of pizza, Joe's marginal utility is 10, so we place a dot to represent the total amount of marginal utility he gains with one slice of pizza, that is 10 units of utility. When Joe eats the second piece of pizza, he gains 6 units of utility, so we place a dot at 6 at 2 pieces of pizza. Notice there are 2 dots, so we can connect them together to help us better see what is actually happening to the marginal utility. When Joe eats the third piece of pizza, he gains 3 units of utility, so we place a dot at 3 at 3 pieces of pizza. We can connect the second dot to the third dot to better understand what's happening to marginal utility. When Joe eats the fourth piece of pizza, he gains 1 unit of utility. So we place a dot at 1 with 4 pieces of pizza. We can connect the third dot to the fourth dot to better see what's happening to marginal utility. When Joe eats the fifth piece of pizza, he gains no utility. So we place a dot at 0 and 5 pieces of pizza. We can connect the dot from the fourth piece of pizza to the fifth dot to help us better see what's happening to marginal utility. Finally, when Joe eats the sixth piece of pizza, he gains minus 2 units of utility, or loses 2 units of utility. So we place a dot at -2 and 6 pieces of pizza. We can connect the dot from the 5th piece of pizza to the 6th dot, representing the 6th piece of pizza, to help us better see what is happening to marginal utility. Notice that the line is downward sloping, which indicates that the marginal utility is declining as more is consumed. Generally, economists assume that marginal utility declines or decreases as more of a good is consumed. Sometimes economists use the phrase diminishing marginal utility to describe what happens to a person's utility as they consume more of a good.